So, how are things? How's the game coming along? Good, good. Think I just need like 6 more months to wrap things up.
One eternity later.
How's the game coming along? Really good. I'm so close. Think I just need like 6 more months to wrap things up. Hey guys, welcome. Games take a long time to make. Maybe you've had friends and family asking about your progress and you feel like you just keep giving the same answers. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know you. Leave a comment down below so I can get to know you. I need more friends. If you're working on a game, then I hope that this video will validate you and your journey. And if you have friends and family who keep pestering you about when your game's going to be done, send them here to this video. I'll set them straight. So maybe you've seen thumbnails like this, and it can make it confusing as to why, if you can make a game in 72 hours, why does it seem to take years to make one that's ultimately going to end up being priced the same as a good coffee mug? Well, welcome to game development. I heard a quote recently that said indie game development, where the first 90% of the work takes 90% of your time, and the last 10% of the work somehow still takes 90% of the time. Why? Let's get into it. So what does a finished game actually need from a development standpoint? It needs a story or an objective of some kind with an interesting beginning, middle, and end. It needs graphics, it needs code, and it needs sound and music. At the very core, that's what's needed. So on the surface, especially if you're not doing it yourself, it can sound like making games isn't actually all that hard. Maybe with a really good plan, you can crank one out in a year, maybe even less. That sounds reasonable, but that's almost never how it plays out. And one of the reasons is because of iterating. I like to use Stardew as an example just because so many people are familiar with it. But when you look at Stardew, literally just about everything you see in that game has been made and remade many, many times. Eric was just one guy with very little art skills and a computer science degree. He started by using placeholder graphics from other games, and he just learned how to do pixel art through pure trial and error with thousands of hours of practice. Making a video game is an art. And art, it's not just slapped together and then called done. It's iterated on. You could spend months painting the perfect sunset, trying to get all of the colors just right, making sure that the light hits the trees in just such a way that it conveys the right mood. And video games are no different. And there are a lot of reasons for this, but a big part of it is because you, as a developer, you are going to grow in skill as you continue making your game. And as the months go by, eventually you'll run into something that you made like 6 months ago and you'll be like, ew, I can do better now. Everything is iterated on. Just about anything you see in any game you can think of, any mechanic, any art asset, anything, it's likely been made and then tweaked and then retweaked again and again. See this? This is a sprite sheet from Hollow Knight for the first major boss. That is a lot of art, and there are 47 bosses in that game. Imagine drawing those animations by hand, frame by frame, and iterating and tweaking 47 different times. And that's just the bosses. There are over 150 normal enemies in the game and over 15 whole areas that all need unique art assets. And by the way, this is just art we're talking about. You can apply the same thing with dialogue and story and code and design. And you know what? Sometimes you can spend all of this time iterating and tweaking and revising, and still, in the end, that piece of content you're working on, whatever it is, it may not make it into your final game. You could dump hundreds of hours into one particular section of your game, only to realize that it somehow doesn't work or doesn't fit. And so by the end, you're likely going to have piles of work that nobody sees ultimately except for you. Video game development is an art. Just like how writers have to deal with making their books bleed in the editing process, and just like movies, they always have all of these deleted scenes and countless shots that never made it into the final edit. Sometimes you have to kill your darlings. That is a creepy ass quote that I came across online, but essentially in any artistic medium, and I think that that quote was meant for writing specifically, but it still applies. You're going to have characters or story elements or mechanics or something that you as a developer really, really love, but ultimately for one reason or another, it just doesn't fit into your project. The creator of Stardew actually got feedback that there should be more options that you can do with your barn animals. And so at one point, he actually added the option to butcher the cows in the game. So now you've actually got a choice. You can collect and sell milk products, or you can butcher your cows and collect and sell beef. And I imagine that would have been a lot of work to fully implement, and he did it. And it does make sense to give players that kind of choice, but that feature was ultimately ultimately scrapped because Stardew's creator didn't like it. It didn't feel right for the game. Hollow Knight had multiple enemies, charms, dialogue, NPCs, even abilities like backdashing and swimming and dream diving, as well as the entire Forest of Bones area. All of that got cut from the final product. As a developer, you have a vision of what you want your final product to look like, and there will be things that you sink a lot of hours into that ultimately no one's going to see but you, but that's just a part of the game. Shovel Knight, when it was first released, promised to create more playable characters, and so they got to work and they implemented that. And of course, these new characters, they have to be unique and different from the main character, so they were given unique movesets and abilities. And then once that happened, it became very apparent to Yacht Club Games that these new characters, they were not going to work in the regular levels because those levels were designed specifically for the main Shovel Knight character. So they actually had to build new levels on top of new characters, which ended up costing a lot of money and a lot of extra time. You can read all about that actually in Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, which is a fantastic book that I would recommend to any aspiring game developer. I'll leave a link to that down below. But things don't just mash together in games. Ask any designer. Specific things are made for other specific things. Bosses in Hollow Knight move and attack the way they do because of how the knight, your main character, was designed. The bosses were designed around the knight's movesets, and you can't always plan for stuff like this because when you're making a game, you're trying to make something that people find fun. And what's fun is, first of all, it's very highly subjective. Everybody has a different idea of what fun is, but sometimes what is fun can play out very differently in reality compared to what you thought would be fun in your head. Video games have an extra element that other art mediums don't have to worry about: how the game feels. And you can't always just jot something down on a piece of paper or have an idea in your mind and just implement it and have it work out exactly the way you thought. It might feel good but not be fun, or it might be fun but not feel good. Sometimes there's just no way to know. That's where iterating and constant tweaking and sometimes ultimately scrapping stuff, that's where that comes in. Because you're trying to make something fun, something that you thought would be fun, but no matter what you did or what you changed, it just didn't come out that way in the end. And it happens. You know, you might play some game demo online or watch a trailer and think, whoa, like this looks and feels really good. It feels like a finished game. And it can be really tempting to think they're almost done. How much longer could it possibly take? But you don't know what's going on inside the mind of the developer who released that demo. Chances are they hate 100 different aspects of that demo, and all they can really see is a big mess of stuff that needs to be fixed or changed. Demos and trailers and vertical slices, they're all really good at covering up issues, but that doesn't mean that the issues aren't there. And one of the things that can really hinder a game's progress is poor optimization. This can happen from a lighting perspective, an art perspective, a code perspective. A lot of it really depends on what kind of game you're making. If you're making a 3D game and you have dynamic real-time lights sprinkled all over your scene, this is drastically going to hinder the game's performance because your PC has to calculate bounce lighting and shadows and all kinds of crap in order to render that lighting. You could have a really beautiful scene and it could be filled with all sorts of interesting gameplay and things for you to do, but you have one asset placed in your scene and you duplicated it all over the place, like a rock, for example. If that rock has too many faces or too much detail, then it's going to slow your scene down. If you're instantiating and destroying every single projectile or bullet in your shooter game, then that's really going to affect the performance of your game until you switch to an object pooling system. Even if you don't know what that means, it doesn't matter, because the point is, just because it works doesn't mean it's done. There's this invisible level of polish that every game needs, and even though the end consumer, the people who buy and play your game, they may not see it, the game won't run well without that invisible level of polish called optimization. I think most game developers deal with an overwhelming amount of self-doubt. I can promise you that making a game is no easy task, and most developers have to fight off thoughts that they are not good enough to finish their game. I'm often on a roller coaster of emotions from one day to the next, and even though it might come off as a little bit cheesy, I actually do a lot of positive self-talk. Here's a picture of a note that I have taped right above my computer, and the reason that I have that there is because when I'm stuck on a problem, or I'm trying to create something and I'm struggling to figure out how to go about it, my brain starts talking, and that little voice creeps in that starts telling me I'm stupid. And it says things like, you're not going to make it, you're no one, you don't have enough experience, you have no computer science degree, you're just a wannabe. But I put that note up there because I take self-doubt very seriously. If anything is going to slow me down in creating my game, it's going to be self-doubt. There are literally a million things that need to get done in order to finish finish a game. And if I'm doubting myself every single step along the way, I'm probably never going to finish. Or I'll sure as hell procrastinate and make it take a lot longer than it needs to. And I have to imagine that all developers go through very similar struggles to my own. So if you're a developer, I hope that you found this validating. And if you are a family member of someone making a video game, then show them some love and support because they are doing something monumentally difficult. What else can I say? Games take a while to make, but I cannot think of anything more gratifying in the entire world. If you want to see proof of everything we just talked about, check out this video right here where I spent an entire month tweaking just one single mechanic for the game that my wife Nikki and I are working on. Oh, and subscribe. Bye.